Hello friends, this is Scott, and I'm taking a look at my potatoes in my storage room. I wanted to plant these as seed potatoes, and I think they might be ready to go. What do you guys think? Now these are the last of the potatoes I didn't get to eating from the project garden, and it looks like it might be a little warm in here. It's nice and dark, but it's right below our washer and dryer room, and so I think it just heats up a little too much. Where I'm planting my potatoes today is the old strawberry bed. As you can see, my new strawberry bed above the wall there. First step, I'm just going to rake it out. It's on a little bit of a slope. It doesn't have to be flat. I'm just trying to get some of the debris out of here and just get it leveled out a little bit so I can put my potato bins in here. Now, I've been growing my potatoes at my house in plastic bins, and I'll show you those here in a minute. I think potatoes do much better if you just plant them in ground, but because of all the tree roots here, I really don't have an option to plant in ground. So I'm going to go up with the potato bins and hopefully do better this year. And looking through this bed, I've got lots of trees that are volunteered. So I think these are probably maple trees. It seems like that's what throws out the most seed at the end of the year. Not quite sure, but they're really easy to pull out once you do them, if you do them young. If you let them go several years, then you got a little work on your hands. But I wish I knew what kind of trees these were and if I had a use for them, because I have a little nursery going here, and I'll give you a close-up look of these. Nice little root structure for 1-year-old plants or trees. They'd be good to plant elsewhere if I had a spot. Now here are my plastic bins that I grow my potatoes in. And they're a simple plastic corrugated material, kind of like an egg crate. They come with these little green attachments that just screw in. And you just make the rounds, whatever size you want. Put them together. And then you use these little D-leave bobs to screw them in. As you see, here's a close-up of the bin. Really simple, really easy. Now here's a look at the close-up of the little screw-in dealies. Very simple. They just have a couple threads on them, and they just go in the holes. You line them up, and you just screw them in. Now the reason you use these type of bins is to eliminate cutting of potatoes when you dig potatoes. A lot of times when you're digging them, you damage the potatoes, but these are simple as above ground. You just fill them up with dirt, fill them with potatoes, and then you just unscrew them and open them up. I've had these for many years. I often lose a little green D-leave bobs, so I use zip ties. Simple. Again, there's not a lot of weight in these. You can use medium gauge zip tie and just zip them together, and then you just take some clippers if you want it to look a little better and just cut the excess plastic off the zip tie. I'm placing my potatoes here for one reason, open space, and for another reason is the ground here is getting kind of thin. The tree roots are all through it, so I want to raise the soil up here. So when I'm done with the potatoes, I can just leave the soil here, rake it out, and I've just built my bed up. For those who haven't watched my videos before, this is the way I move my dirt through my yard, is through 5-gallon buckets. And people say, why don't you ever use a wheelbarrow? Well, I'm going to show you again, as I have in previous videos, this is why I don't use a wheelbarrow. Because I've got all these stairs, and it's just simpler just to fill up buckets and carry them down rather than tipping over wheelbarrows and making a mess everywhere. So lots of buckets, lots of trips, but I get her done. Now, I don't have to fill these bins all the way up right now. So I'm just bringing the 5-gallon buckets and dumping probably a bucket and a half in each of these bins, just so I can tuck the potatoes in there. As the potatoes grow, I just add more soil, and the potatoes will continue to root out on the stem, and then as they grow more, you add more soil, hopefully all the way to the top so that you can get plenty of potatoes in these bins. Now you can use other material like straw or hay. Potatoes will grow up through all of that material. You just need to add supplemental fertilizer. So I use soil just so I'm not having to fertilize as much. You can use any type of container also, as long as you can open them up and access the potatoes. There's some bag types that they sell now. They're just as easy. They just zip Velcro together, I think. But anything that works that you can easily remove and harvest your potatoes is the best thing to do. I've seen people even use tires and just keep adding tires and filling them with soil. I don't know how healthy that would be, but my yard's getting a little redneck from my wife, so I don't think she would appreciate it if I brought in a bunch of tires, but we can see. So I'm getting down to the end here. I don't need a gym membership. That's my other reason for liking to carry the buckets. It gives me a little bit of exercise. Soil's a little heavy. This is more of a compost topsoil, so it's not real heavy, but when you do bark and compost, it's pretty readily able to do. It's soil that gets to be heavy. Now, I think this is my last bucket for the first go around before I start planting. So I'll leave a little bit here. I don't need that much. Just want to level it out and get ready for planting. I'm going to experiment with one bin of shriveled up potatoes from my storage and just see how they do compared to the store-bought seed potatoes. Now, I did go to IFA and buy 4 varieties of seed potatoes, or maybe it was 5. I think I have 2 red, 2 white, and a blue, and here they are. I just mix them all up. I like to have a surprise when I harvest, so I don't usually separate them out or mark them. So to plant them, it's as simple as throwing 3 or 4 seed potatoes in each bin. Now you can cut them up as long as you have a couple eyes per potato, but I'm kind of under the assumption that the bigger the potato or the whole potato will do better. It'll have less chance of rotting. And I think overall, the bigger the seed potato you plant, the bigger the plant's going to be and the more it'll produce. So that may or may not be accurate. Not all these are very big, but I'm just going to throw 3 or 4 in each one, and then we'll just go for it. Again, in-ground potatoes seem to always do better than these plastic bins, but you got to do what you got to do in an urban environment, and I don't have a lot of space where there's not tree roots or other plant roots. So I just go up when I need to have access more soil space. So after I have them all loosely put into each bin, I just go through and I just firmly put them in the ground. The soil that I put in earlier with the first bucket, bucket and a half in each one. So I'm just spacing them out evenly. I think I did most of these. I think I have 3 in, but some of the smaller ones I put 4. But just make sure there's good soil contact. You can also pre-sprout your potatoes like you saw my mess, but a happy medium, just a little bit of sprouting. But I didn't have time to sprout these. I just got them at IFA and they just barely came in, so they're not sprouted. You don't have to wait. Just get them in the ground, get them wet, and they'll take care of themselves. After getting them all firmed in, I'm back to the truck for more compost. So I don't need a ton right now. Again, I don't want to fill these all the way up to the top. I just want to cover the potatoes in a couple inches of soil, and then as they sprout and come up, I just add more soil until they are spewing out the top, and hopefully have tons of potatoes along the stems with more rooting activity going on the stems by burying them. And with more root growth comes more potato growth, so hopefully the harvest will be better this year. So with a new spot, new soil, a lot of sun here, and building it up, I hope that I'll have a better harvest than I did last year. This is a much sunnier spot than where I had them last year, and because last year they were very tasty, but they were small and there wasn't very many of them. Potatoes in my project garden that were grown in ground were much bigger and much more plentiful. And here's a look at the covered up potatoes, just enough that you don't see them. Simple, really. Potatoes are a no-brainer crop. Again, if you cut them, sometimes they'll rot out, but if you throw in whole seed potatoes, you really have no worries. You'll get 100% germination. I always stress the use of mulch in containers, but I also really want to stress that you've got to water in the crop before you mulch, because a lot of times your sprinklers or other things will not water enough to get through the mulch. So you've got to retain moisture by soaking it heavily before you put the mulch on. Now here I'm applying just hay. Again, I don't use straw because of glyphosate or Roundup being used commonly with straw. But I'll get some weeds with these. But in these bins, it's all good. It's all temporary. I got a little string I got to get rid of. But I just cover them up, and as easy as that, I just water them in again. Just make sure everything's soaked good, so that the straw, if you leave it dry, it'll suck some moisture out of the soil. This way we don't have any of that. The straw or the hay will just retain the moisture. So here's a look at the finished potato bins, all planted and ready to go. So we'll just wait for continued growth, and when I start seeing them and they get a couple inches taller, I'll just keep adding soil and adding more soil until they hopefully reach all the way to the top, and it doesn't take long. And here's a look at my strawberry onion bed all mulched in. I pulled some mulch aside, and they are all growing nicely. And with what I've got left from my bale, I always give it to the chickens, because the chicken yard gets messy, and this is a good hygiene, as well as a good activity for the chickens. You throw scratch on this, they'll dig through it, and they're the little compost turners. They're the makers of next year's compost. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video on planting potatoes in above ground containers. And if you like this kind of video, please check out the other videos on my channel, Growing Contentments. And I appreciate all your support. The channel's growing nicely, and I'm excited for the future. So if you want to continue to follow me on my journey and living my best rural life in the city, please subscribe to my channel, like, share, and comment, as there's much more to come. Thank you.